Welcome to Invisible, Breaking Through the Stigma of Addiction. I'm your host, Dean Anderson. I'm a local addiction counselor who has been gifted by Rogers TV the opportunity to talk with people in the community about addiction and all things that surround it, and the people that work in it and the things that they do to help break stigma and break down shame. And we're really grateful today to have our first guest, who is Laura Bell from Turning Point here in London.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So I introduced your name, but I didn't introduce your role, and your role is Executive Director of Turning Point London. Can you tell me a little bit more about Turning Point?
Turning Point is a long-term recovery home where clients stay from a minimum of 3 months up to a year. There's program every day, and we also require that they go to an additional 6 self-help groups, such as NA, AA, or CA, a week, along with our programming that we do every day.
Mm-hmm. So what's the main objective to that? I mean, how does that supposed to help opposed to other treatments or other modalities?
What we do is we try to build a foundation of the recovery while living in the community. So we give them a freedom, right, to do things in the community, but also have a little bit of a structure to build the foundation of recovery to when they're on their own, they've had this year or 3 months or 6 months to build a foundation. So when they're out on their own, they have a routine into what they do to maintain the recovery when they're on their own.
Nice. So what is it that you do in order to help them maintain that routine and to make it stick and to help them?
Well, we have a schedule every day, so they have to be up by a certain time. Mm-hmm. They have chores to do. Everybody's does a different chore a week, so it rotates, so they learn how to do something simple, like just washing the bathrooms, because some people have never done that, right? And then you have other people's on the end of the spectrum that they know how to do all of that, but it keeps them in a routine of doing it every day. And also some people don't know how to cook, so when they're put on lunch or supper, it teaches them a life skill, along with the other life skills that we teach in group throughout the week.
Right, and we can recognize that you just said there's a spectrum of people that some know and some don't, and in that regard. So teaching those life skills are always valuable for some. How does the routine itself play into sobriety?
Okay, well, when you're in active addiction or active alcoholism, you're not kept to a routine, so you're maybe sleeping all day, or so we get you up at 7:30 in the morning and we teach you that you have to shower every day and get into that routine, just like if you had a job. Like you're not going to have a nap during the middle of the day if you have a job. So we keep you busy throughout the day and held accountable to other people in the house as well, right? Okay. Yeah.
So what you're saying is I should stop taking a nap in the middle of the day?
That's correct.
Okay. I'm self-employed, so I'm like, okay, I'm going to be harder on myself. So we recognize that there's a level of self-care, and that contributing to self helps them work and feel stronger and feel more motivated to work towards their own self-care and making sure that they're self-sufficient in that regard.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So in addition to that, you said that there's external programming. What does that look like in regards to their recovery and what it is that they need to do?
Well, we try to show how to live life on life's terms without the use of drugs and alcohol. So we incorporate like our lifestyle groups as well, and also relapse prevention. But we also incorporate recreation. So well before COVID, we had volleyball that we did every week, and we do yoga in the houses, and sometimes we do meditation, everything that kind of rounds out the whole balance of the recovery. And we also like to have fun. So we have external things, like sometimes we'll have dances, or we'll do a euchre night or stuff like that. We got to show you that it is fun in recovery as well.
That's so often overlooked. And one of the things that I've heard in my experiences with groups in residential treatment or whatever is people recognize they're like, I don't realize how much I laugh or didn't laugh prior to when I was in addiction. I didn't laugh as much, and then when I get this group of people together and how much you can actually laugh and have fun while in recovery, and those things start to reset themselves in that regard. For sure. I love that you said at the beginning of that, living life on life's terms. That's probably one of the biggest ways that I can say cope.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So learning how to say, you know what, it's not about protecting somebody and putting them in this structured home that says, hey, we're going to do everything to take care of you.
Right.
We're going to help you learn how to cope so that you can go out and do that on your own. What is it that they do within the household to help them cope, or with coping skills and the emotional side of things?
Well, we have one-on-one counseling as well. So, and we have an open door policy with all our counselors that if there's something bothering you at any time, come on in. Like, we're going to talk to you at any time. And, you know, when you're in a recovery home, you're pretty much structured. You're in there, and you don't go anywhere without, you know, your either people or your staff. But, you know, if you're going to the grocery store and, you know, you run into a trigger that happens at the grocery store, somebody's using or somebody's drinking, you know, it's a safe place to come back to and say, this is what I encountered. You wouldn't encounter that in a recovery home, right? Or not a recovery home, but a treatment center, because you're not going to be seen by that. It's not out there. So we teach you how to, okay, you see something that is not comfortable for you, brings you back into something, let's bring you back out of it and show you how to live through that instead of just having to deal with it on your own.
Right. So the exposure makes all the difference.
Absolutely.
Right? The analogy I like to use is it's like going into an employment situation where you get, or you go into education, you want to move and transition into employment. There's a co-op. There's a transition. There's like, I'm learning how to do it and I'm understanding what that looks like and I can transition into that. Whereas a lot of other treatments can have it where they're in residential, they're bubble wrapped in this safe space, and then they're kind of sent out into the world, and then they see that person in the grocery store and they go like, I don't know how to deal with that now. Who do I go to? Where do I go?
Exactly.
Whereas the long-term, I don't want to call it sober living, long-term recovery home. Forgive me, my brain's been saying sober living in my head. So long-term recovery home, in that space, they can then slowly expose themselves in a safe environment to those and develop their coping mechanisms and dealing with triggers and all that.
That's right. That's right. And the beautiful part of it is, in a home like ours, is people are coming in at different points, right? So you're going to come in new, but somebody's already been there for 6 or 7 months. Somebody's been there for 3 months. So you're learning from them, and it's all different. So it's nice that they have the newcomer come into somebody that's been there before, and all the experience that they've had is what makes that place a beautiful place for me anyway.
Oh, a beautiful place for a lot of people, I'm sure. So that giving back, that cyclical piece, right? That's the cornerstone of a lot of 12-step processes, and you know, using that. You know, I have some experience. So going back to the job front, I will always be better at my job when I actually teach the skill.
That's right.
That I've learned, because then it reinforces the skill that I learned by teaching somebody else to do it. So is that what I'm hearing is happening within the household? Exactly.
And when a new person comes in, they're on what's called an in-house probation. So they can't go anywhere in the community at first because they're very vulnerable when they come in by themselves. So always somebody from the house goes with them. So it's almost like a buddy system for the first 3 weeks, and then we reevaluate after that. But it also teaches the people that have been there a while, let's help the newcomer, let's work that way, and then it gets them prepared to help the next newcomer, right? It goes along that way, so it works really well for the peer system. And they're really accountable to each other. That's really what makes that place work. They're so accountable to each other. It's maybe the first family they've had in a very, very long time.
Family.
So, yeah.
I like that word. I like that word. How would you compare them to a family as well, and the dynamic? How else does that look like a family environment in the house?
I feel that our home is like a family, and that's what it is. We like to tell the clients when they come in, welcome home, because you're going to be here. And we get to know them better sometimes than our own families at home, because we spend so much time with them, right? And we get to know their deepest, darkest secrets, and work with them with that. And same with the other ladies or other gentlemen in the house as well. They get to know each other on a more intimate level than they've probably gotten to know anybody.
Right.
So it is like a family, and they stick together.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And that allows for some trust and vulnerability and those things that you normally wouldn't get anywhere else when you're struggling with trauma or whatever else is underlying the addiction, correct?
Right.
So I recognize that you're the executive director for Turning Point with the men's and women's houses, but specifically I'd like to ask you what really sets the women's house apart? What is the difference? What are some of the struggles that they might have specifically in the women's area? Because that's what this episode is more focused on.
I think there's not a lot of places for women to go. There's definitely a lot more places for men to go in the community and outside of the community as well. And, we have to teach them to trust other women, which is a big thing, right? Not really sure what specifically you're looking for there, but...
Yeah, I know that there are different dynamics with gender, and you just hit on it really.
Right.
Looking at the difference between, there's less houses, or I know that there's a different stigma for women. Sometimes there's young children involved, and there's those
Yes.
things like that, whereas, the men's houses are, have those different barriers or those different things that,
Right.
that might be at play. So I was just wondering if there's anything in that regard that stands out to you.
Well, definitely children come first, especially turning point. A lot of times ladies coming into us have lost their children or in the threat of losing their children, right? So we work with other agencies as well to try to build that back up again, because we feel family's very important. And the other ladies can share their experience with their children and maybe lack of children from there to move forward in the community. So yeah, we work with Children's Aid a lot. We work with other social workers in those areas to try to build that family back up again. That's so important for us.
That's fantastic. And you said something previous while we were sitting having a conversation before the show about the fact that it's very common, I'll just paraphrase this real quick, that's very common that women can find a place to stay much easier or quicker because of their vulnerability or whatever that looks like. And I want to be careful, choose my wording properly, but there's a potential for them to just say, oh, I'm just going to go find a couch to sleep on, whereas a man doesn't get that opportunity. So they kind of go out into that. So with that, they're not also, when someone allows them just in their home, they're not necessarily going to seek treatment.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So we have an opportunity to create more of this sober living houses and do that, right?
Absolutely, yeah. They don't show up in the numbers as well. Even if you look at statistics from just withdrawal management alone, is that there's only a certain amount of beds for women. So when you're doing a statistics for it, it looks like the women don't need a bed. But that's not true. It's because there's less beds.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say to government officials that we need more of this because they're not showing up in the numbers, and that's what they're looking at is the numbers, whereas we're looking at the people.
Yeah.
And the people on our wait list, and
And funding's all about statistics, we know
Right.
that. So really super quick question about funding.
Okay.
Where does it come from?
We're funded by the Ministry of Health.
Okay.
So when a client comes to us, there's no cost to them, which makes it a great relief to them because most of them don't have any money, right? So how will you get help if you don't have any money? And it's that big vicious circle. So
Absolutely.
we break that barrier.
Okay, so we need more of that. We need more of the funding in the Ministry of Health. We need
That's
more
right.
of these houses to help more people for long-term recovery. I'm sure you see a lot of success stories.
We do, and we also follow our clients for an extra 18 months after that, as far as we can, right? Like we ask them to stay connected.
Yeah.
We also ask that maybe they join our alumni, which the Alumni Association puts on fun events for the people that are in the houses, like things like getting them tickets to the Western Fair by their fundraising events, stuff like that, to show them again, life is fun in recovery.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so I want to thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it. And then we're also going to have talk to somebody right after this who actually has lived experience in living in the house. So we're really looking forward to that and having some more information. But we appreciate you being on the show, and we want to let everybody know that if you got somewhere to put your funding, or you want to help or do something to help create more of this type of facility in the city, we really need it, right?
We absolutely do, and thank you very much for having me.
My pleasure. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to Invisible. We're super grateful to have people with lived experience on the show. And right now we have Sarah Woods, who's experienced as well with sober living here in London. And she's going to share some of her experiences and strength and hope with us. Thanks for having us. Well, thanks for having us. Thanks for coming. All right? You're having me, I'm having you. Okay. Thank you for coming, Sarah.
Thank you for having me, Dean.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So I would like to just dive right into it. And I know we talked the other day, and you were able to share some wonderful insights on your experience with sober living. And I would love if you could just, give me some of that goodness of, that experience that you had with participating in sober living in London.
Sure thing. I kind of want to start where, it all began for me. I grew up in a very small community in British Columbia, and it was calm, it was quiet, but early childhood trauma combined with some other things that went on in high school. I left home when I was 15, and I've been running since. And not until, it wasn't until I took a pause, and that was through Turning Point here in London. It was this opportunity for me to stop running on self-will, as we say in program. To ask for help was very difficult, with the stigma around addiction, for me to accept help was difficult. But through that process, I've learned to trust. And it's been this beautiful, growing, it's a lifelong, lifelong program, but I'm just eternally grateful for that landing place that Turning Point gave me.
Trust is a beautiful word. How does that play into your healing? How does that trust in the sober living home, how does that work into your recovery?
There were a lot of suggestions given to me in the beginning, and I'm a very headstrong, stubborn woman, so it was difficult for me to let go and accept that these people who asked nothing of me but to take a suggestion, this is a safe place for you, and there's food, and there's other women who are in a similar position to you, not always identical, but very similar, and we were all running on fear. And I had to take that moment to realize that. I hadn't done that before, so it was learning to trust the women in that, it's like a little ecosystem. And there's so many different personalities. It can be challenging at times. However, it was just, it was a point in my life where I didn't realize how important relationships were, true relationships, connection, listening to somebody, not to respond, but to hear them. Holding space, learning to trust through holding space, it's just a beautiful thing.
Wow, wow. So clearly you're in a women's house, and you bring that up. How does that role of the gender and of being a woman's house play into your recovery specifically?
Addiction itself, I think, is a very nameless, faceless thing, and to be in a community of women who are bettering themselves or learning about themselves, digging deep, it's taught me that as a woman, I'm allowed to feel. And that was a very hard pill to swallow because I'm so independent and I do everything for myself and I don't need your help. That's not true. Those were all old ideas, right? So having these women around me to support me through tears and laughter and the mood swings and the madness, yeah. It was just, it's a beautiful thing to be able to feel with other women, and to harness that purity and that vulnerability and to let go. I wouldn't have been able to do it without that space.
That's beautiful. We recognize the value in connection and the value in having a team of people or a group of people around us. In my work every day, I'm trying to really hit that home with people and say, look, you need to recognize it, you need to surround yourself with it. And then in the 12-step process or in this type of thing, that's like the cornerstone of it is saying, here's a bunch of people together. And what you're saying is the gender also gives you an opportunity to connect with like-minded in the sense of understanding some of your pains and trials and tribulations that society have. Right?
Absolutely. It's that I spent a lot of time around guys. Like I was a tomboy. I am a tomboy. They do the fun stuff. So I thought, right? So it really engaging with women and hearing their point of view, their perspective, their perception of things was life altering for me. I had never taken the time, perhaps because seeing a woman as competition, or living in that fear of not being accepted or that fear of vulnerability and being forced to break that down through spending time around them and seeing their side of things. It was just, I don't want to cry.
You're welcome to. So when we talk about gender specific,
Right.
Is there societal norms and things that are pushed upon you as being a woman in recovery, or that are attached to addiction that you find is difficult to overcome, or things that you recognized?
Absolutely, it's the external things. It's the image that's very difficult. I mean, in this 12-step program, I've had people say, "Well, you look great. It must not have been that bad." And that for me, it's kind of stuck. It's not a resentment, but it's definitely a thing. And that's how I think a lot of people view addiction itself. Like if she looks fine, she must be fine. And that's so not the case. I suffered in silence for a very long time because of that fact. It's important to not read a book by its cover, and that goes for so many different things in life, but also with addiction. Right. If you look well, or if you look like you're doing okay. That kept me in addiction for quite some time.
Yeah.
Not only did it keep me quiet, silenced, it's difficult to break through that, to say, you know what, I might look okay, but I'm not feeling okay, I'm not okay. And that's what Turning Point allowed me to do, to spend time around women who are also not okay, who have children, or, this idea of what society says functioning is. Am I truly functioning? I had to question what that was for me.
Wow.
If that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. It sounds very invalidating, and it sounds like your pain doesn't matter. As long as you look pretty, it doesn't matter. And it's kind of a societal norm in social media and the things that we do to say, as long as the outside's okay. Or as we say in the recovery world, I'm comparing my insides to your outsides.
Absolutely, that's just it. Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
I'm hurting really bad inside, and you
Yes.
look okay on the outside, so therefore you must be okay.
Right. And I'm guilty of that as well. I did that for a very long time. I'd see a woman who was stunning and I can't talk to her. And little did I know, a lot of my brothers, a lot of my sisters in this program are just those women exactly. They're independent, they're strong, they're forces of nature, but they definitely do hold their own. And I'm grateful for the women in this program, because it's taught me that despite appearing strong, it's okay to be vulnerable. Those two things can coexist. And I never knew that.
Wow, sounds very profound.
Right.
And that's why you're on the show.
I mean, it's all through, my higher power in this program. I wasn't this woman I am today until I came into these rooms and meeting the people that I have. What I've learned through people, just in being willing to share their vulnerability, that's what's taught me the most valuable little nuggets, right? That's where I get them. It's just through sharing and truly connecting.
That's awesome. So the vulnerability itself, how does that help in the healing process?
I mean, we can have a conversation, right? And I can tell you about all of the trauma that's gone on in my life, the choices I've made, the things that have happened to me or around me, and I don't need to feel it. It's when I get vulnerable with another human being who's experienced something similar that we can feel it. I feeling my way through my healing. I didn't know that, and that sounds so corny, but it's truly what I've come to understand as that's the healing process. You may re-experience some of the trauma, but I have tools today to cope. I have tools today to soothe that inner child who's been crying out. Holding space for little Sarah and holding space for the other little children.
Amazing, amazing. So the sober living and the vulnerability and the being able to connect, and you're drawing all these lines to see everything together. It's normally a 1-year stay. It's not something that happens overnight. You're actually living in this environment, right? How did the time come into play? Like having that year, how did that help your recovery in general?
It was this sensation I hadn't felt before. Like I have a net to catch me. It's really hard to describe, but it's just that. I have time, and I never felt that I had time before. There was always, I need to go to work, and I need to make money to do this and do that. You know how it goes. This scramble, and this living on self-will, like I was just in a mad dash constantly, running from myself, running from you, running from truth, running from fear. So it was that cushion of time that I'm convinced I needed in order to maintain my sobriety today. Like it was a chance for me, and I felt that, not with being entitled, it was just this opportunity for me to take a moment and pause in a safe environment with love and gratitude, the gratitude that's in these homes, the appreciation that we have for what people are giving to us. I see it every day, yeah.
Right. So taking a step back and being able to focus on you and not be concentrated on other things gives you a chance to go a little deeper and to heal and get into those routines and create a pattern and recognize those things. It's like imposter syndrome. You know what I'm talking
yes,
about?
Absolutely.
So, and many people will understand it, but it's this idea of I don't belong here and I shouldn't be here. But as time goes and as I start living that and as I start submerging myself in that, then I don't know anything any different. I'm just like, oh, I've always been this way. I've always been that person. But there's this idea of being able to recognize I'm sober, I'm living in a sober world, and I'm having, this is my lifestyle now, and I can really embrace that.
True. I couldn't have put it any better. It's actually it's exactly that. It was the the fundamentals. So what I had been doing my entire life, get up, go to work, function, or think I was functioning, and what I didn't realize was I was missing out on life. I wasn't stopping to, actually have a conversation with anybody, or to share a meal with somebody and actually engage with them. It was, we have dinner around the table together, mandatory. And at first that was difficult because I'm used to isolating.
Yeah.
My disease wants me to isolate. So spending time around them in that environment, or just living in that flow, has taught me more about truly living than I ever imagined. It's my motives, my goals, my view, my perspective on the world has completely changed.
It has such a powerful meaning because in today's world, there's a lot of hurry up, get better, and get back to being productive. Hurry up and get better and get back to, go do something. If you go and be productive, then therefore you're worthy or you're valid, and keeping busy will keep you safe. And it's not always that. Sometimes it's stepping back in order to process and to heal and to do that. And I can't heal and change and grow when I'm too busy trying to figure out how to pay the bills or how to do whatever, right?
Absolutely. That bit on that piece on image as well. It's, if you look well on the outside, you're ready to do it. Go, go back out into the world, spread your wings, which is fantastic for some of us. But for myself, I found that there's there's a lot coming up now, that as the central nervous system notices that we're calm and we're in a safe place, new things begin to surface, and that's the magic of it, right? It's but also it's that stigma around, you look fine, like it's probably a good time. It's up to me to say I'm not quite ready, or setting those boundaries, which is still difficult. It's still a challenge.
Right.
Yeah.
So the message at the end of it all is time takes time.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Anyways, so yes. I can't thank you enough for being on the show. I cannot express how big of a deal it is to be able to be vulnerable in this space, and to be able to go and be public about your recovery, because recovering out loud means so much to us. So I can't thank you enough for being on the show and being part of what's going on here. And I thank you. I'm going to thank you for letting me be on your show. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. You're so welcome, Dean. No, it really was great to be here, and I wanted to thank you for giving recovery a voice here in London, and that's what matters, is to talk about it. We need to start talking about it.
We're doing our best. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Dean.
And we'll be right back after this break. Hopefully we hit home the importance of long-term recovery homes today. And when we think about addiction, we can note that it takes a long time to get there. It's not something that happens overnight. It's continuous use and patterns and people, and those things are learned. And as humans, we don't unlearn things. We can't just simply forget what something is. So we can't just say, hey, forget what this is, or forget what that life looks like. So in order for us to make changes, we need to learn new ways of living. And that also takes just as much time. Some people it takes a few months, and some people it can take multiple years. So the long-term recovery houses and sober living, it's what they do. They integrate, they expose, and they teach people great things. So there's lots of opportunities in our community to have more of these, and to contribute and to advocate for. And if you have that in your power to do so, we strongly recommend that you do. And thank you for watching Invisible, Breaking Through the Stigma of Addiction.